Food is more than just what's on our plate. It's the places where it's grown, it's the people who grow it, and so much more. Join me, Janice Person, your host, on Grounded by the Farm every other week as we talk about the foods we love. For this episode of Grounded by the Farm, we are back out on the road. Thank God, finally getting out of the house. So this is the first episode of the third season, really. We've done one 2 weeks ago is going to be about education, but this one is the first where we're talking to people who are living this world close to agriculture and farming. And I'm on Maryland's Eastern Shore, which is a pretty unique place in that it feels a lot more southern than northern, and it feels so much more ocean adjacent and water adjacent than most people think of Maryland as like Baltimore. So totally different when you think about the Eastern Shore. There's a lot of rural areas and things, and I'm here with my friend Dana Zucker. Some of you guys may know her from Instagram. If you don't know her already, follow her. She's got 2 accounts, Mom's Good Eats and Sugar Water Manor. I first met her, she was in Omaha, Nebraska, but for some reason we thought of her as like a New Yorker kind of. This season is not going to have any really linear stories. We're not going to go, okay, we're just going to talk about pumpkins today. The whole season is going to be, let's talk about a topic and somebody that's really been experiencing that. So with Dana, what we're going to talk about is you've had a really strange journey with agriculture, and you really come at it from a food and travel perspective. Is that right?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. So how would you say you entered into this world of food and agriculture?
I would say, first of all, it's my love of food.
Yeah.
And knowing more about my food. I'm somebody who can't be stuck on one thing. I always have to find out more. I need to take it to that next level. I'm always raising the bar on whatever I do. And I think I did the same with food. So I didn't want to just eat it. I wanted to know more about it, where it came from, what was going on. And I love travel and the culture of travel. It's not travel to go to some destination. It's learning about that destination and the depth of information from there. And when you talk about travel and culture, everything is wrapped on family and food. So I had a love for that. And wherever I traveled, I wanted to get to food, farms, wine, and food. So that's what I did.
Yeah, I'm pretty similar. It's a strange world in that I've always been really interested in different cultures and things. Mm-hmm. And you always end up talking a lot about food.
That's where you learn everything, is in the kitchen. But it starts before that.
Yeah.
And I think it's like we were talking earlier today. We're so young in the United States, we don't realize how grounded we are in how it grows. Because you go to Italy, you go to Greece, you go to China, these cultures, and the families are out growing it, picking it together, and then cooking it together. Mm-hmm. So that's what I wanted to learn about.
And it's a thing in the U.S. where a lot of us feel pretty far away from the farm. And you lived a decent amount of your life that way, I would guess.
Oh, yeah, all over the place, pretty far from farms.
Yeah. And so now you have a place. Do you call it a homestead? Do you call it?
We're registered as a farm.
Okay.
The reason is because I wanted to be sure that we were somehow giving back. And since I grow for our local food pantries, I wanted to make sure I was following all the right procedures and processes. So my eggs are for sale quality. So I'm registered to sell eggs, and I'm registered to do all of that. So we are a farm. And I think when you think about farm and homestead, you think about homestead, people think about off the grid or this romantic piece. And it's a little bit different because we also feed our guests and we feed our community.
Right. So let's explain what you're doing here, because you really are like on the waterfront.
Yeah.
I've shot some video and we're going to share it on the website. But you also have extra houses that you've worked up.
Yeah. So when David said, let's move to Salisbury, I was actually in Iceland on an Icelandic sheep farm. Of course, just wow. And I was going to learn about Icelandic yogurt. So it was weird because I was actually on a farm and food tour in Iceland. And so I came directly here and I just looked at the area and I'm like, this is it.
Yeah.
And then I came and I found this property a couple weeks later And we have the historic home, but there was also 2 other houses, farmhouses, and another little area that we have, the loft. And so at first we're like, oh, we'll fix them up and the kids will come and stay. And as their families grow, they'll come and stay. And we realized the more we were doing, we had to share this place. And I had to share more because there's that doing more thing. It's just an issue I have. But I wanted to be able to share this special place. We have 70 acres that goes from wetlands to riverfront. We have farmland. We have areas for animals. I mean, we have oysters that are growing out in the garden, in the water. And we have the apiary. It's just, I don't know any other word than it's magical to me.
Yeah.
And I had to share that magic so other people could experience this because not everybody has the ability to experience this on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah. So can we think about how you grew to this? Like, have you been building larger and larger gardens in different homes before you bought this place?
We were in a flat downtown Omaha.
I thought you were
this.
I thought you were in downtown.
I didn't even have a plant in the house.
So it set you up to be a farmer. I think this feels like a gateway for a lot of people in my spaces. So many people have a real interest in how their food is grown and stuff, but maybe they can't afford it.
Yes.
Or maybe they haven't planned their life around building something like this or something, right? And if you're young, it's really hard to afford it.
Yeah.
You and David have had a few years in your careers and
just
your
a
children
couple.
are older.
Yeah.
So, you're no longer paying for school bills the same way. So you're at a place where you could do something a little different. And now you've made it so that you're also a business.
Yes.
Because it's an Airbnb property, right?
It's like Airbnb. We have our own website for the lodges, but love Airbnb.
Yeah.
I mean, I think it's such a wonderful place for people to connect.
Yeah. And how far are you from DC? Like people come out?
2.5, 3 hours. It's where we have to take the puppies for their surgeries and stuff for their orthopedic doctors. So it's not that far. We get people from New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Annapolis, DC, Virginia. That's mainly our little hub of people. And they find us basically looking for a farm stay.
Yeah.
And, I could just kind of say, yeah, come stay here. But the fact that we get to interact and watch things happen, watch kids pull a vegetable, try something for the first time. And I have a lot of parents at home who send me notes going, I just want you to know that we say, well, Miss Dana would want you to try that. And that's how we get them to try food still.
Well, it's pretty wild. So you have a nice big size garden with lots of raised beds. And then what all else do you have?
So in our garden, we have 6 raised beds and we do, 12 raised beds. We have 6 fields, 12 raised beds. In those, we do those year round just about. We have 2 herb. Then we use them for gardening all year. I like using the raised beds because it helps make things more real for our guests. It allows them to see how they can actually take 4 pieces of wood and do it in their backyard in a very small space and grow a lot of food. Yeah. So during season, 1 raised bed is dedicated basically to if a family was growing a backyard garden in 1 raised bed.
Yeah.
And then we farm them. We use them in the fall, and then I'll hoop 2 so we can grow in the winter. And then we have 2 cold frames as well that we grow in. And then we also have 6 fields that go past the gardens, and we have asparagus. So one is just asparagus. And this year we did it a little bit differently. And then I have an area that we do garlic and onions and stuff in.
Yeah.
So the garden itself is big, but then we've expanded that to an apiary area. We have our garden house, the fruits. We are putting in fruit trees. Yeah. So we're trying to get back to that piece where this land might have been used for before, but we're the first full-time residents here.
Yeah.
So we're the first ones actually using it for what it is
and,
here. And
it's more like the type of farm people used to have because you have a menagerie of animals in the barns.
Yeah, we were supposed to have a Nigerian goat milking program, but we kept getting these misfits, and they just kind of ended up here. So I have 9 goats with no milking capability except for the one that's still nursing her babies. But they're good for educational purposes because it allows me to talk to our guests and visitors about the different types of goats. So I have from meat goats to pet goats, from
Yep.
boars to pygmies.
Yeah. Yeah. And you have chickens and ducks and
Chickens,
guineas.
ducks, guineas. I mean, guineas have such an important role in our environment with eating the ticks and being alarms and doing what they do so wonderfully. I'm surprised we don't hear any right now. And
Yeah.
the chickens and the ducks, and to be able to talk to people about the differences between a chicken egg and a duck egg and why they're so different and so important.
Yeah. So it's sort of weird because most people would think, farms are typically larger entities now.
Mm-hmm.
And things like this are more for personal use or
Exactly.
things like that, personal passion. You've never owned those big farms. How have you learned about farming at the level? So you've gone to these weird countries that you
Yeah.
were saying you would learn about a specific kind of wine because you were in Spain.
Or I'd be on a tea farm or a duck farm in China or whatever it is. Yeah.
Yeah. So how did you get from that to knowing enough to be able to talk about it yourself?
YouTube and Instagram. No, kidding. It's actually very valuable when you're looking for specific things. But I would say it's because I always wanted to learn more. So when I was working on my websites, How I Met You,
Yep.
I engaged in activities and sought out activities or resources that would get me to the people where I could learn more. And one of them was Where I Met You on the Kansas farm tour. And I got to see all different types of farming because to me, I look at farming and everybody should have organic farming and everybody should do this. But being on those things, the tours, and being on a farm where you have a family standing in the middle of a soy field with a little newborn baby, in my head thinking what conventional was, thinking what GMO was, and what the marketing was telling me those were compared to what was really going on, I needed to learn more. So I just sought that information and got to the people I needed to, not for only myself, but for also those people who read my articles and do what I'm doing. So that gave me that seed, more so than just the food and travel. Those actual tours, meeting you, allowed me to go, I need to learn more and I need to share that information. The false marketing that was out there, everything that's labeled non-GMO, which has no GMO product in it, it just was wrong to me.
Yeah.
And we can't feed the world right now with organic practices. So how do we come to a place and how do we work together to come to a place where we're not using false marketing, we're educating the consumer, and we're doing what's right for the environment?
Yeah, I think part of it is that constant curiosity.
Mm-hmm.
For you, it seems to be energizing. For some people, it can be overwhelming.
Exactly.
That you need that constant curiosity. I mean, sometimes you just, it's, I think why people buy food, right? Because they just know what to expect and they don't have to think about it.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly.
So for some people, it's really hard to maintain that curiosity, but you're just feeding it all the time.
Yeah, I have an issue with it, but I want to be able to share that. But also, I have the ability and the time through the career path that I've chosen to go on a farm tour for 4 days and to stand in the middle of cattle and learn about why Debbie, for instance, why she raises this particular group of cattle. And it's not because she's sending it off to a feedlot. It's because she's trying to make better cattle and improve the environment and talk about sustainability and that whole piece. A consumer who's going in to buy meat sees, the white labeled with the fancy little thing. I was raised all grass fed and everything. And here's the store brand right here.
Right.
And they don't realize that store brand might have come from Debbie's cattle, she works on a sustainability committee with, globally.
Yeah.
So I think that those are the things that I'm able to learn more and get energized on and share that information. And if I share it, whether it's on my websites or if I share it with a family that's staying here, I can't tell you how many people I talk to about Brandy and Debbie and those people, because they then share it with somebody.
Yeah.
They then talk to their butcher about it, and they can learn more.
We keep mentioning Debbie. And
I know.
I told Dana earlier that I'd already asked Debbie to be on the show. It's Debbie Lyons Blythe, and she farms in Kansas. She ranches in Kansas, and she has sons that have now come back into the business with her. So we're going to be talking about that later. But it is one of those things that it's when you meet farmers, for a lot of us, you know, my first farmer that I ever went out to visit with, and he took time to explain soils to me in a way nobody ever took time to talk to me about. And so for me, when I think of farmers and soils, Mr. Ray always comes into mind. So, you know, when I started a podcast, I had to go talk to him. And I think that high energy level from our passions, from not having known it, but been so curious is it's what I'm trying to cultivate with Grounded by the Farm all the time, right? Like if you don't know something, great, let's start finding ways to learn about it. So how did you start, like where were those points where you started getting a thread that you could start unraveling or something?
I would say it's when I learned that what I thought were best practices I could do for myself and I could do for my family, but it couldn't be done on a larger scale. So how could I then create an environment where people could know about it all and make the right decisions and choices? But we also take it a step further because we use compost in our lodge houses. We do all of that. So we're teaching people how easy it is to do in their home. So we're teaching them also about, you know, sustainability. And I think it was just a matter of getting here, being on the farm, and then saying, what is my passion to share that with?
Yeah.
Now we've only been here, it'll be 3 years in January. We've been open less than a year. And a lot has changed. I think, you know, it's just the state of the world right now has changed.
Right.
And I'm starting to get to the point where I can connect more of the dots and put those together and figure out where I can take this passion and my business model and expand it so I can share even more through my stories and through, I call them stories, but through my experiences.
Yeah.
And beyond just our guests here.
Well, I love that, you know, immediately when I said I was coming, you're like, great, this is awesome. And by the time I arrived here, you're like, okay, so we're going to go over to the University of Maryland Eastern Shore, and here's who we're going to talk to. So you found ways to find resources here in your community. And I assume you've done that everywhere else. But,
yes.
You know, these things called experiment stations and extension services and master gardener programs. Right. And those are things that are available in every state. Now, they may not always be in your backyard. You may have to drive an hour or so to get to the location for some people.
And we did that on Sunday. We had to drive an hour and a half to get to the location where we needed to go learn about oyster gardening.
Yeah.
Because oysters are so important for our waterways here in order to clean them. So it was so important that we were able to do that, but then we're also able to talk about it. So for us, it's important. I know that not everybody can do that, but you can, especially in this new world we're living in. Most extension offices are offering Zoom meetings and Zoom classes. We were handed one by Dr. Escobar today.
Exactly.
On a piece coming up, and they're doing a lot of community type gardening or gardening in your backyard, container gardening.
Yep.
And I think those resources, and to be honest, resources that we have for free on YouTube, on following different people on Instagram, you can pick up little pieces and grow in a pot in your backyard.
Yeah. Well, you know, you and I know Natasha Nichols from
yes.
We Sow We Grow, and she was on the podcast. I mean, like once I knew I was going to have a podcast, I was like, well, I have to talk to her about her gardening efforts. You didn't have this yet, so we didn't have that defined.
Yeah.
But I do think that some people like you and Natasha trying to dig in and learn all the things so you can make it easily absorbed by others is pretty important, because some people want to go into great depth and other people just want to know somebody has done a lot of research. And I will tell people, when I first met Dana, she had a list of like 200 and something questions that she wanted to ask me. And it was, I mean, mind blowing how she wanted to get deep into the science and deep into what we were thinking and what we were doing in agriculture and how we treated our customers and things from my past life in a corporate world. But it really is, it's hard to do that work. And you know, sometimes you were exhausted by it, I think.
I do. And I think I had, and I still have a responsibility to my readers, to my viewers, to my followers when they ask those questions to get answers. And there are days on Tuesdays where I do Ask Me Anything. People ask me questions and I need to go back and find answers because I get energized from it rather than saying, I don't know. And I could send them a link or this, that, and the other. But I feel responsible for providing the best information that I can find available or to get them to the right person. And I think that having this place has allowed me even further to do it because I can not only do that, but I can test things for them.
Yeah. So we've made it all sound really fun and games.
Right.
But tell me what have been, so you've only been open for a year. Mm-hmm. You've had the place for almost 3 years. What's been the hardest parts of it?
Learning and the hours. I think I feel like I'm doing my hobby every single second when I'm out here, but then I realize how exhausting it is because some days are super long. We don't just garden in the summer, we garden year round. We'll be planting seeds for spring in the next 2 weeks. We'll be planting garlic. Our winter garden will get started. Mm-hmm. And then sharing that information and then also having to go inside and doing the business end of it and not just this. And I think that's the hardest thing that people understand is the sustainability of the economics of it, whether it be in farming, ranching, or whatever. Yeah. You got to spend time in all of that. It's not like it's sexy.
I think that's one of the hardest pieces of farming is it's really a small business. So you have to do everything. So any small business, you have to do everything or hire it out to somebody. Right. And so many small businesses don't have the resources to hire it out to everybody. So,
and that's it. You know, it's kind of, for me, it's so important that I share what I know about farmers and ranching on the larger scale because I have more access to the consumer and I have more access than a farmer rancher just because of what I do. And I think people don't know. They think this farmer, they have acres and acres and they're probably making a ton of money. And they don't realize that it's just been on the decline for farmers at under certain acreage. You're not talking under 500 acres. You're not talking under 1,000 acres. You're talking under 2,000, 5,000 acres. It's just the world that we are in and the destruction of some of the global warming, some of the destruction we had in the Midwest, people losing entire farms.
Yeah. And
consumers don't have, it's not within their scope to go look for that information or to see it. I'm fed it every single day because of how I'm connected to it. So I think that that's a really important thing to people to know is that it's blood, sweat, tears, a lot of dirt. When I go in with dirt under my neck, I'm like, hi, honey, isn't this nice? And I show him my neckline. It's like a badge of honor.
So have you had things that just you couldn't get to go right?
Yeah. A lot.
I mean, farming, especially when you're learning something new in any field of study, right? When you're learning something new, the challenges are hard, but some things you want to do and you can't.
Yeah. Tomato. I love tomatoes. I wanted canned tomatoes to eat all year long. Like that's what I want to do. Yeah,
oh my God. Tomatoes are my favorite.
Oh,
fresh
tomatoes. Growing tomatoes here is hard because we're sandy. So I tried a lot of Mediterranean approaches to growing because it's much like some of the soil that they have over there. So it's a lot of research and looking and trying. So we had a terrible tomato crop and it's just what it is. We use organic practices. So we do hand picking off of things and it takes time. And then we had to switch things up and, we should do companion planting and the winds. How do we plant so that the winds don't destroy things coming off the river? And there have been things that haven't worked. And then, having this grand idea that I was going to have this milking program and then, things happen for a reason. And I am sort of grateful that didn't work out. And now I can have people interact with our animals when we're doing chores and they can help with chores so they can actually see we got to clean the buckets every single day. And this is why we do this. So I think the failures have turned into good in other ways. And I always try to make light of that and learn from it.
Yeah. I think if you're an entrepreneur or small business, you kind of have to find ways to either pivot or
it's my favorite word.
You're hustling, you're pivoting, you're doing all the things.
The guinea fowl are rolling all in the seeds I just planted. How am I going to do this so I don't have my guinea fowl rolling in my seed I just planted? Because that cost me $3.98 for that packet of seeds. And you don't think that that's a lot of money, but when you're planting seeds every 30 days, it's a lot of money.
It adds up, and if you're not keeping track of it, it's really easy for you to start doing kind of a money pit, right?
Yeah. Oh, so easy, especially in gardening and animals. I mean, we laugh.
If you consider it your hobby, how many of us actually track our expenses on hobbies? Yeah. And so when you've done something like this that feels like your hobby, it would be really easy to spend wildly.
Yes.
And farming, you really can't do that.
No, and I think that also makes a little bit different in what I'm doing because I'm learning, because I only have 50 chickens, and so every single day I eyeball them in the morning at night. And I don't think that people realize that farmers or chicken farmers eyeball every single chicken, even if they have 5,000. At least once a day, they're walking through their houses. They're walking through their yards.
They know if one's limping, they're like, hey, what's that about? Let's check it out.
And the difference between them and me is I use it as an educational perspective in order to take care of the bumblefoot, because I, talk to the backyard person or one of those things where they're working on, thinking, do I have to cull? Do I have to treat? What if it's antibiotics and I have to do this? It's a whole different world. And I think it's important that consumers understand that, because I think so many times farmers and ranchers get bad raps, and Big Ag gets bad rap.
Yeah.
Where I think if we can talk to them on a different level, that they'll understand how important it is in our food systems, and that we keep our food systems in the United States while we regain them back into the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a great point. And making it a little less judgmental.
Oh, yeah.
I think as you learn more, it's easier to be more open to more ways of doing things, right?
Right.
And you kind of mentioned that early on you had some pretty defined set of rules.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think it's a lot like when we were talking at the experiment station today. Experience station? What did they call that?
Experiment station.
That's what it is, which is so...
They're doing experiments there.
Yeah. We were there today, and how she was talking about that needing to diversify what farmers are doing. So they might grow other types of crops rather than just the crops of the soybean and the corn rotating. Mm-hmm. How do you diversify some of that? And I think that people need to know that people are looking into that. And as it grows, we can't just grow soybeans and corn, although we need so much for feed. We need to be able to diversify to feed our communities too. Mm-hmm. Because here on the Eastern Shore, very little food for human consumption is grown. Yeah. But if we can get some of the farmers to start growing some of that stuff, we can have more here, which would be great.
Yeah, yeah. I love a good local farmers markets and mm-hmm. things. And, those are a piece of feeding myself and my family and stuff. It's not the only piece I use. I do have family that are pretty self-sustaining when it comes to their food. I have family like me that buys most everything, grows herbs maybe, or some that don't grow herbs. Some years I do tomatoes, but not always. So what would you tell somebody if they wanted to get into this? Like, are there resources? What would you say?
Well, I think about what is this, and I think about what I've done. I think that there are there's a lot of different pieces, but I think for the farmers and the ranchers who are looking to diversify and be able to get out and talk to the community and talk to the consumers, to have something like a bed and breakfast on it. First of all, diversify your income. And second of all, it brings the consumer to you, and you don't need to be afraid of that. I think for so long we were so afraid to show the consumer farms. Mm-hmm. I've been on them. I've been on big farms with, Kansas and stuff, and it's been amazing. Yeah. Amazing. And the people I've met have been amazing. I've been on, some of the chicken farms here on the Eastern Shore. I think for that, that's important to learn and to reach out to people who are already doing it.
And I would say they don't have to do anything nearly as extensive as you. I've had friends that just did popcorn.
Yeah.
Or just did a couple of pigs for home use and to sell locally.
Right. Or if they're
whatever.
If it's the farmer up the street and they have a extra house, or they have a stall that they can change into an Airbnb, which I have stayed in before. I've stayed in tack rooms that they've converted. Just for somebody to be on your farm and wake up there, and if you spend 10 minutes talking to them in one day, that's all they need to understand and have that good experience.
Yeah.
It's not all about the fancy dude ranches.
Yeah.
And I would say to the consumer, if they wanted to do something, first of all, get to an experience. Go to a farmer's market if you haven't been. Go to a pick your own. But then step beyond that and find a way to talk to somebody else.
I think those are the
something.
easy steps, right?
Yeah.
So pick your own apples, strawberries, pumpkins.
Exactly.
But to find that next step can be a little bit intimidating. So there are a few ways. Farm stays like yours is a great way. There's a lot of them. We'll put a few. I've got a few other folks that I know are doing them. Sometimes at the farmer's market, you can actually have real good conversations with people and go and visit their farms.
Exactly. And I think that's a big part of it, to be able to actually get out there and see what they're doing. And I know more and more local farms who are at farmers markets will do an open house day.
Yeah.
Where you can go out. So make sure you're signing up for their email list. You're going to their Facebook page and following them. Yep. I think that a lot of us, I'm very neurotic about social media, but I think a lot of us are so busy that we don't post enough on social media, or we forget to tell you we're doing an open house. So you just have to make sure you're paying attention to social media and those things, because we just don't have time. Now here, one of the things we do is we send our guests home with something. So it's either seeds that we have saved with instruction on how to plant them. And it's something they can plant in their, if they're in a New York apartment, they can put in their window.
Yep.
We send them home with some of our honey so they can actually see that. Our honey harvest, we had a full house here. So we had 12 people out, and we had to move it to an outside location to harvest so that everybody could experience it together. And with COVID, it was a little bit hard, but we made it work. And so everybody got to hands-on experiment with that.
Yeah.
Which I think they go home and tell somebody else. And I think I told you the story of the carrot 1,000 times. I had a kid pull a carrot and tell me it's not a carrot because it wasn't the little baby carrot.
It was long and pointed.
And I said, taste it, wipe the dirt off and taste it. And he looks at his dad. It's like, it's dirty. Dad's like, wipe it off. Just listen. Wipe it off and taste it. And he bit it, and he said it was sweet. And, they were talking about it. And then the teacher called me a couple weeks later and said, this kid was at your farm. They were telling me what they were doing. Can you do a Zoom class with us? And it's those kind of things that we can start to pass down the line, because if you can impact one person as a consumer or as a farmer or a rancher, that's going to actually impact more people than you know. So stop to make that connection, I think, would be the overall thing I would say.
Yeah. Whether you're on the farm side or on the city side or
the consumer side. Yeah.
Just go ahead and try and stop and make a connection. And I think for both sides, to give each other the benefit of the doubt and be ready to ask questions and listen and answer.
Right. Because I think, like I said before, we can't have at this stage in our world, our lives, one type of farming in order to feed everybody. I think, and we're also still learning.
Right.
And I think we need to understand what those all are. And the more we're able to educate ourselves in our food, then we can make better decisions.
For ourselves, for our family,
and others, and for the
our
community.
Communities at large. Yeah,
exactly. And help with those. I mean, I think that's another part of it, is just get involved.
Exactly. I mean, and sometimes maybe your involvement is at the local food bank, and you tell them, hey, if any farmers say they need gleaning crews, sign me up.
Exactly.
I mean, some of those kind of things work really well. I've also been at a Feeding America when they basically had me going through produce that came in from farmers and saying, that looks really, okay, that may go to a compost pile or something.
Right, exactly.
I wouldn't want to send that into somebody's home, but it came in all at once and hadn't gotten all processed and hadn't gotten all out. So there's a lot of things you can do to learn about it and kind of find out who else is growing in your area.
Exactly. And call your local food co-op, call your food local, if you're a part of a co-op, or the local farm stand people, because they always could use extra hands. I know I used to help package up food at the co-op when we lived in Austin, and they did the, for every $1 in, why can't I think of the name of it, in food stamps, they gave $5 actually when people came out to their farm. But a lot of these people had never used raw kale. They had never used raw. So we actually talked to them and showed them how to actually use it, how to crunch it in your hands, how to do these different techniques in order to cook it at home.
Yeah.
So that was really important that we had that ability to teach them how to use that food. And a lot of local farmers markets and farms are looking for those people to help volunteer on harvest days before the farmers market.
If that audio was picked up, that sounded so like a farm truck, and it's a construction truck. It's totally different.
Oh, no, that he actually has his farm truck today. His daughter's a barrel rider.
Okay.
Usually pulling a horse.
Well, that gets me, I think, what I wanted to talk to you about. There's the websites. Could you?
Yeah. So the website for here is sugarwatermanor.com, and that is for our agritourism lodges.
Yeah.
And then for Life Done Well, which needs some loving right now, but we're still creating content for, is just lifedonewell.com. And you can always follow us on social media at all of those.
Yeah.
Sugar Water Manor or Life Done Well. If you follow us on Mom's Good Eats Life Done Well on Instagram, you can see our daily happenings here on the farm.
Some of my family started following you before I came, and we're already like, "Oh my God, did you see?" And I'm like, "Yes, I've seen it."
Not only
now
did
I'll
I
have
see
to tell
it, but that
I'll have to tell them I
Yeah.
was here and I had the breakfast from the fresh eggs. Thank you.
That's right. And that goat that had the one horn, the goat-a-corn, yes, he does really climb up on you.
He really climbed up on me.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks so much, Dana.
Thank you.
Everybody, don't forget, we're going to be putting up some photographs and stuff. We mentioned going over to the University of Maryland. I have some photos from that. We're going to put all that stuff up in groundedbythefarm.com, and we'll put all of that kind of connections and stuff in the show notes, so you'll find it really easily. Don't forget to follow us too. And thanks, Dana, for being here.
Thank you for being here.
Yay.
Let's go eat seafood.
Yes.